What if I told you that Bianca Censori isn't Kanye West's wife at all, but rather an undercover government handler agent deployed through a joint CIA-Mossad operation as part of a reactivated MK-Ultra-style mind control program, sent not to love, but to contain, control, and pacify the most unpredictable man in modern pop culture for simply speaking the truth. And if you're thinking, AD, I love you, but that sounds insane, I'm here to tell you, I love you back, but that's the point. In February of 2025, Kanye West and Bianca Censori once again broke the internet. It started with the Grammys. Bianca arrived on the red carpet draped in a fur trench coat. Then, allegedly on Kanye's command, it was showtime, baby, and she dropped it. She was wearing nothing underneath. According to Kanye, she became the most Googled woman on earth. Then came Kanye's now infamous X-rant, one of many. Anti-Semitic, anti-Black, fat-phobic. He claimed Bianca made her own choices, that she wasn't trapped, but also that he had dominion over her and free puff. He was suspended, apologized, called the rant a social experiment, and then took it all back. Days later, he released a bizarre Super Bowl ad filmed in a dentist's chair, which directed viewers to a Yeezy website selling a single item, a swastika t-shirt. The site was quickly pulled by Shopify, but not before rumors started swirling that Kanye had allegedly been intoxicated on nitrous oxide during the shoot. Was this a calculated stunt or a full-blown addiction spiral? No one knew. As always, the world is watching KKK Kanye, and no one can agree on what they're seeing. In the middle of all this, something strange happened. Part 1 of my Bianca Censori series, a video I had uploaded 8 months ago with zero traction, suddenly blew up. My account got monetized, the comments poured in, and a pattern started to emerge. She's not just a wife, she's a handler. CIA, MK-Ultra, Mossad, and the comments kept coming in. And eventually they started to haunt me because I hate the idea of missing the real story, especially if there's allegedly something deeper and darker going on. So on the suggestion of my subscribers and a late night booty call, I dive back in. I pulled every headline, every leak, every lawsuit, and every stunt. I rebuilt the entire timeline, cross-referenced events, tracked the shifts in narrative, followed every alignment from clone rumors to disappearances and reappearances. And when I finally stepped out of the rabbit hole, I realized this wasn't chaos. It was choreography. The pattern, too tight. The rhythm, too deliberate. This deep dive isn't just about Bianca Censori. It's not even just about Kanye. It's about what happens when we live in a world where the truth has collapsed and conspiracy becomes the only thing that makes sense. You're not watching a Psy-Op from the outside. You're living inside one. Let's start where this conspiracy actually begins. Not with Kanye West, not with Bianca Censori, but in this stone-cold building called the Allen Memorial Institute at the base of Mount Royal Mountain in Montreal, Canada. Ask anyone in the city and they'll tell you this building has bad vibes. And once you understand what happened here, you'll know why. Between 1957 and 1964, this building became ground zero for a Canadian offshoot of Project MK-Ultra. We're under the supervision of Dr. Ewan Cameron, and with covert funding from both the CIA and the Canadian government, some of the darkest psychological experiments in North American history were conducted on unconsenting civilians. Patients were subjected to electroshock therapy at 30 to 40 times the standard intensity, sometimes multiple times a day. They were pumped full of thorazine, barbiturates, LSD, and sedated for weeks. They were forced into drug-induced comas, and sometimes they were locked in rooms and made to listen to the same audio loop for over 16 hours a day in a process Dr. Cameron called psychic driving. The goal was to break and de-pattern the mind, to see if you could erase things like memory, identity, personality, and rewrite them from scratch. MK-Ultra isn't just a Cold War relic. It's the foundational blueprint for the modern celebrity handler conspiracy. The conspiracy that Bianca Censori is now tangled in. Because what MK-Ultra once did in secret, the advertising and entertainment industries now just sell as strategy. So it's not exactly surprising that decades later, People don't believe Project MK Ultra and operations like it have disappeared. They just believe it got more underground, more corporate, and maybe even prettier. In the traditional sense, a celebrity handler is just a fancy term for a personal assistant. Someone who helps coordinate appearances, manages schedules, and keeps day-to-day operations running smoothly. If I were famous or just more successful, I'd want a handler too, okay? Everyone wants a piece of A-D, but there's only one of me. However, in the conspiracy world, the handler isn't a helper, but rather an agent. Not of the celebrity, but of the system. In this version of reality, handlers are embedded industry and or deep state assigned operatives who monitor, contain, and reprogram. And ground zero, pre-Kanye, is obviously Britney Spears. Britney's 2007 meltdown, followed by her 13-year conservatorship, controlled by her father. I know you're gonna come for me for the pronunciation. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Conservatorship became a case study in how a global pop star could be legally converted into property. Her story had every ingredient of a dark conspiracy theory: rehab, forced medication, 24/7 surveillance, and financial exploitation under the watchful eye of people claiming to act in her best interest. And she wasn't alone. Lindsay Lohan, Amanda Bynes, girls we grew up watching, collapsing in real time and then reemerging years later looking, sounding, and acting different. But in my opinion, when the handler conspiracy theory jumped from Hollywood to hip hop, it hit even harder because themes of surveillance, control, and manipulation aren't abstract in the Black community. They're lived experiences. Take Gucci Mane. When he walked out of prison in 2016 after what I think was a 39-month sentence, fans were suspicious. He looked and sounded like a completely different person, and the jokes rolled in. That's not Gucci, that's a clone. And rather than deny it, Gucci leaned in, tweeting that he could neither confirm nor deny the theory, and the memes exploded. And memes, in our economy, then and now, are good for business. Which brings us to the main characters in this theory's most unhinged chapter: Kanye West and his wife, Bianca Censori. If any celebrity embodies every layer of this arc, the breakdowns, the vanishing acts, the suspicious reboots, it's him. But Kanye West didn't just fall into the conspiracy. In my opinion, he's the first to learn how to weaponize it. And it all started in 2016 with one name: Harley Pasternak. For context, in 2016, Kanye West was in the middle of his St. Pablo tour when things started to unravel. His performances turned into unfiltered rants, accusing Jay-Z and Beyonce of betrayal and having killers, condemning the radio industry, and voicing support for Trump.
Obama couldn't make America great because he couldn't be him to be who he was.
Then, seemingly out of nowhere, he was hospitalized at UCLA Medical Center for temporary psychosis due to sleep deprivation and dehydration. We later learned he'd been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Kanye would go on to say that he was misdiagnosed, first blaming sleep deprivation and then later claiming the real diagnosis was autism. For years, this event was kind of just another entry in the Fame Eats People Alive archive until 2022. When Kanye leaked a text message allegedly sent to him by his former trainer, Harley Pasternak. The message read,
"I'm going to help you one of a couple ways. First, you and I sit down and have a loving and open conversation, but you don't use cuss words, and everything that is discussed is based in fact, and not some crazy stuff that a dumb friend of yours told you, or you saw in a tweet. Second option, I have you institutionalized again, where they medicate the crap out of you, and you go back to Zombieland forever. Playdate with the kids just won't be the same."
That one line, second option, I have you institutionalized again, where they medicate the crap out of you and you go back to Zombieland forever, broke the internet. And suddenly, 2016 didn't look like a breakdown. It started to look a lot like a takedown. At the time, Pasternak was Kanye's personal trainer. And according to reports, Kanye was at Harley's house when his doctor, Dr. Michael Farzam, not Harley, called law enforcement for a wellness check. That call is what got Kanye hospitalized. But after the text leak, the narrative shifted. What had once looked like a professional concern began to look a lot more sinister and coordinated. And Kanye never one to leave a breadcrumb unexplored, doubled down. In interviews, he would frame Harley not as a trainer, but as some kind of state-sponsored handler placed in his life to medicate, monitor, and control him. And just like that, the conspiracy against Kanye had its first face, name, and villain. The reason this story stuck is simple.
It shows you the kind of handlers that are around the superstars in California, right?
Harley's background isn't typical for a celebrity trainer. From 1994 to 1997, Harley Pasternak worked as an exercise and nutrition scientist with the Canadian military, specifically the Department of National Defense at the Defense and Civil Institute for Environmental Medicine. This is where he would study how substances like caffeine and ephedrine affect cognitive and physical performance in soldiers. Then, in the late 90s, he pivoted from optimizing soldiers to training celebrities. His client list would include Halle Berry, Robert Downey Jr., Penelope Cruz, Megan Fox, and yes, Brittany Murphy. To be fair, Harley's never hidden any of this. He posts about it openly on social media. He's published peer-reviewed studies, and his credentials are public. But by that point, facts didn't matter. The internet had already decided. Celebrity trainer? Nah. Government asset? Seems legit. And the timing of that text leak, as we'll explore in Chapter 3, highly sus. Bottom line is, I did my own research. And nobody can convince me that Kanye West isn't out here running a game. On you, on me, and definitely on the easiest prey of all, academics. So when Bianca Censori suddenly appeared, silent, hyper-aesthetic, legally bound, right after Kanye's deranged Alex Jones interview, but also before an album rollout, no one batted an eye. They leaned into the narrative and the memes wrote themselves. She wasn't just a wife, she was a plant. The new handler, the upgrade, MK Ultra Deluxe. But here's what I missed. Bianca Censori didn't just appear in the haze of Kanye's collapse. According to lawsuits, she allegedly had been standing in the smoke for years before she was cast as the chosen one. When I first released my deep dive, The Mystery of Bianca Censori Part 1, the mainstream narrative was simple. Bianca Censori was a mystery woman who went from Yeezy employee to Kanye's wife seemingly overnight. There were things we could piece together: her privileged background, her family's rumored mob ties, her bold fashion choices, and an unapologetic comfort with her body. My video also pointed out her long-standing obsession with translucent fabrics like nylon, a niche overlooked detail that might actually hint at the direction of her future personal projects. And of course, we talked about the perks of marrying someone that high profile when you're trying to make it in the creative world. On paper, Bianca had been hired as Yeezy's head of architecture. But even after all that research, I had a very hard time finding anything she had worked on at the company, and overall the story still felt incomplete. And it felt incomplete because it was. As one really brilliant video pointed out, I'll put it up on the screen. In Kanye's world, women don't appear, they're cast and written into his narrative. So the real question was never just who is Bianca, but how did she potentially go from employee to wife and become the chosen one? Which brings me to the lawsuits. 2024 was a legal bloodbath for Kanye West. After my video was released, lawsuits began dropping left and right, and each of them peeled back the curtain on the alleged chaos inside Yeezy. And these weren't just business disputes. Kanye's always getting sued on some music shit. These as a whole were nothing short of a collective indictment on the brand, the man behind it, and the people inside it, including Bianca Censori. Let's break it down. First, the allegations against Kanye West. According to multiple civil lawsuits and also an expose called Yeezy Confidential that circulated on Substack, a pattern of alleged misconduct emerges. Several former staffers alleged that he imposed his personal fantasies like pornography, Louis C.K., and holding on those around him without consent. But the claims didn't stop there. Plaintiffs also cited public meltdowns and verbal tirades, described as anti-Semitic, anti-Black, anti-fat, anti-ugly, and anti-anything allegedly that didn't align with Kanye's personal image. And these tirades were allegedly directed at employees. He is also accused of allegedly degrading and humiliating staff, and allegedly failing to pay workers what they say they were owed. And in one of the more serious allegations, detailed in a civil lawsuit filed by Lauren Piscata, West is accused of drugging and sexually assaulting her during a studio session allegedly co-hosted by Sean Diddy Combs. In essence, the lawsuits suggest a pattern of what I would describe as the weaponization of kink, indulging in BDSM-coded power dynamics while allegedly disregarding the core principles behind BDSM, which are consent, negotiation, and care. Taken together, these lawsuits present a portrait not just of a man seeking control, but of someone allegedly addicted to domination, or at least the idea of it. Second, the allegations concerning the Yeezy workplace. According to multiple civil lawsuits, as well as the Yeezy Confidential expose, the work environment at Yeezy has been described as chaotic and unstable. Plaintiffs allege that job titles held little meaning. Leadership shifted constantly, especially after 2022, and employees were reassigned willy-nilly without explanation. And some accounts claim that internal communications, including Discord channels and group chats, were filled with inappropriate content such as nudity, slurs, and just overall weird ass vibes. Of course, several workers allege that they were overworked, underpaid, and or exploited. One particular lawsuit filed by Lauren Piscata contains a very disturbing claim. This claim doesn't seem to be part of her causes of action, but it's impossible to ignore. She alleges that Yeezy as a company facilitated US visas for women only to direct them into Kanye West's personal circle for... And finally, we have Bianca Censori. Her name appears in two separate civil lawsuits, the Yeezy Vision filing and the Piscata case, as well as in the Yeezy Confidential expose. Together, what these documents do is raise questions about her alleged involvement in the wider environment of chaos described by former employees. In the Yeezy Vision lawsuit, Censori is accused of sharing explicit content in group chats that allegedly included underage staff. Her representative, Milo Yiannopoulos, publicly denied the allegations, calling them abhorrent and false. In Yeezy Confidential, the whistleblower, Pierre-Louis Ouvray, alleges that Censori once shared a offensive meme titled Edward Hands, along with other graphic material in internal chats. He also claims that following her marriage to Kanye West, her vibe shifted, describing her as becoming cold, authoritarian, and closely aligned with Kanye's vision. The Piscata lawsuit goes further. I bought a copy. According to the complaint, Censori allegedly participated in and at times helped coordinate intimate encounters meant to fulfill Kanye's personal fantasies, including group prior to their marriage. Also, one account, also by Piscata, describes her as being present during a alleged assault and not intervening. Piscata also submitted a alleged 2022 text thread in which Kanye West appears to discuss Censori's life and influence within Yeezy. The text thread goes, "I feel like Bianca Censori came into LA to as many people as possible, break up marriages, and turn other girls into hoes. Something more to it with her though. She's too smart. And she said she was pretending to be an architect. Name withheld, hit me. And she's a full-blown hoe after Bianca befriended her. She's a different person. Name withheld. A Yeezy LLC employee. Fell in love with her. She's been doing damage. What's her potential? She was really inappropriate at the Adidas office. Her moves are too obvious. Do with that information what you will. Let's just say, in a company full of players, according to Kanye, Censori was not just a low-key wallflower in the background. Now, would Bianca's name have appeared in these filings if she didn't have the status that she does? Maybe, maybe not. But it's interesting. And when it comes to Piscata's lawsuit, it doesn't seem like she includes Bianca Censori in it to place blame. She includes her in the filing to support her larger claim, right? That this wasn't just about one man, one meltdown, or one bad boss. This was about exposing a workplace where allegedly power and labor were so deeply entangled, they became virtually indistinguishable. And then there's also that little leaked group chat screenshot dropped by Yes Jules. She posted this during her fallout with Kanye and Milo. In this screenshot, Bianca is one of 7 in what seems to be a private company group chat with Ye at the head of the group chat. So my question then becomes, can this be seen as evidence of alleged inner circle status and power and influence within the company? So what does all of this tell us? First of all, Yeezy wasn't a company. It was a trauma-bonded startup and vibe-based LLC from hell. And if these claims hold any truth, they don't describe a woman merely swept up in the storm. They describe someone who may have learned how to move in it and possibly get noticed. And in these narratives, a woman who, at least according to these filings, fits the mold of a familiar Kanye archetype, effectively and allegedly embodying the down archetype Kanye West has always gravitated towards, an archetype I personally end up being. For free. Was all this calculated? Until she drops a memoir, we'll never know. But here's what we do know. Kanye doesn't just date women. He casts and curates them into roles to serve his self-made mythology. Each woman is designed to reflect a version of himself he needs to project and or protect. Amber was the awakening, Kim the empire, Julia the chaos campaign, and Bianca the reset. But make no mistake, behind all the performative dominance is a deeply fragile man. One whose identity depends entirely on women reflecting him back to himself. His power isn't real, it's borrowed. Because if you take the mirror away, there's nothing left. Real dominance doesn't need a reflection. But Kanye always does. And it's always a woman. And now, DJ Academics. Bianca may not consciously wield that power, but she holds it. And I hope she knows that. Like every perfectly timed Kanye drop, she arrived right on cue, absorbing backlash, generating buzz, redirecting attention, and becoming his silent shield. And in my opinion, her debut was not an accident. As we'll see in chapter 3, nothing in Kanye's world ever is. According to my research, he's not the one caught in a Psy-Op. He's potentially the one engineering it. So who's the real handler now? When most people hear the term Psy-Op, they think of secret military operations or government surveillance. But at its core, a psychological operation is simple. It's a strategy designed to manipulate public perception. A well-executed Psy-Op isn't telling you what to think. It makes you feel like you figured it out yourself. Psy-Ops don't need to insert lies. All they need to do is fracture reality, destabilize consensus, and weaponize belief. The goal isn't clarity, it's control through noise. And once again, this isn't a theory. It's history. Operation Northwoods proposed staging terrorist attacks on American soil to justify a war with Cuba. The plan made it all the way to the top, but from what I understand, JFK said no. COINTELPRO tried to infiltrate and sabotage movements deemed subversive, like Black civil rights. MKUltra, as we've seen, experimented with mind control. And according to Freedom of Information Act documents uncovered by researchers Tom Seeker and Matt Alford, the Pentagon and CIA have influenced over 800 Hollywood films like Transformers, Zero Dark 30, and Avatar, and over 1,000 network TV shows, suppressing, from what I understand, politically inconvenient truths and laundering certain politically convenient narratives in exchange for things like access to weapons and funding. Today, you don't need a security clearance to run a Psy-Op. All you need is a media pipeline with reach, a strategy deck, and a flair for spectacle. Instead of destabilizing governments, you destabilize narratives. Instead of mind control, you create brand loyalty. This is the modern attention economy, and Psy-Ops aren't bugs in the system, they are the system. So to figure out whether Bianca Censori was actually Kanye West's new CIA-planted handler, I needed to go to the root, not of the evidence, but of the theory. And when I reconstructed the timeline, a rhythm began to emerge, not just in what people believed, but why they believed it. The conspiracy lives online, sure, but it doesn't exist without content. It feeds off the content. And the core evidence in all of these MKUltra and handler edits / videos, it didn't come from leaks or whistleblowers. It came directly from Kanye. It's his quotes, his sound bites, and his unfiltered paranoia that's recycled and reframed as theory fuel, and evidence. And when I reverse engineered the source material, every major breadcrumb Kanye dropped about control, cloning, sacrifice, reprogramming, handlers, all of it traced back to 1 year, 2022. And when you place all of this content in context against everything that was happening in his life at the time, you start to hear a beat. One that doesn't just lead to Bianca, but to the very machine that makes people like him and like her matter. This is the beat. 2016, during the St. Pablo tour, when Kanye launched into a string of chaotic rants and was eventually hospitalized for temporary psychosis. At the time, most people chalked it up to fame, pressure, and mental health struggles. But looking back on it, this was the moment the "they're trying to institutionalize me" narrative began. But it didn't become a full-blown conspiracy theory until 6 years later. By September of 2022, something had shifted. Ye was unraveling in real time, going quiet, disappearing, beefing with Adidas, and leaking paranoia through every headline. And this is when Nick Cannon, out of all people, would step in with a theory. He'd tweet, "Convinced that Kanye West's a clone. They messing with my brother's mind. MK Ultra is real." This was the first viral link between Kanye West and the MK Ultra / clone theory. But it didn't come from Reddit, it came from inside the industry. He continued, "His spirit is pure, but devils are treating him like a puppet." A weird comment, maybe, but given the context, Kanye's absence, the crumbling of Yeezy, the fallout with Kim, the narrative didn't appear out of nowhere. It filled a vacuum. And by October of 2022, Kanye returns to the public eye and lights our gaze on fire. We'd get White Lives Matter t-shirts, anti-Semitic bars on Tucker Carlson, the DEFCON 3 to Jewish people tweets, George Floyd misinformation on Drink Champs. And as a result of all this, Adidas would drop Kanye as a partner and he'd get canceled by just about every major brand sponsor. But it's also towards the end of that month that he would give us a iconic soundbite of conspiracy theory lore.
If I ever went anywhere, we know why. You understand what I'm saying?
He'd also give us "They mute you. It's spiritual warfare." This quote was taken outside of North's basketball game when the paparazzi apparently just caught him in the wild. It's that viral soundbite that would become chopped and screwed in almost every single Kanye clone / MK Ultra handler conspiracy video edit. And it keeps building from there. November 4th, 2022, the Harley Pasternak text drops. "I'll have you institutionalized again and you'll go back to Zombieland forever." He would quote the text leak with "mentally misdiagnosed and nearly drugged out of my mind to make me a manageable, well-behaved celebrity." And once the internet discovered Harley's background, well, Kanye wasn't sick, he was silenced. And then, just a few weeks later, on November 14th, 2022, Kanye goes full mask off and does a impromptu street interview, which would turn out to be the payload for conspiracy theorists. It's the sound bites in this interview that are used in most of the conspiracy videos. This is where he dropped.
But come to find out, he's actually Canadian intelligence. But
this is when he dropped.
Shows you the kind of handlers that are around the superstars in California, right?
This is when he dropped.
They can't control me. You get what I'm saying? They can control Shaq. They can control Charles Barkley. They can control LeBron James. They can control Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Not you, man.
But they can't control me.
This is when he'd drop.
My mama was sacrificed.
And this is when he'd drop.
And they wanted to medicate me every day. You realize, like, they could have just switched to medication. And I wouldn't be here.
And this is when he dropped.
They want to monetize and traumatize.
But context is important. And the timing of these little nugget drops cannot be ignored. Exactly 1 week, if my math is correct, after that interview, Rolling Stone drops a brutal expose. It accuses Kanye of the following: running a cult-like company culture, showing to staff, praising Hitler in meetings, making anti-Semitic comments about Kim's Jewish masters, and creating a psychologically abusive workplace for his employees. But here's what's also relevant. If Rolling Stone followed the principles of journalistic ethics, Kanye West would have known this article was coming ahead of time. So now we have to ask the Harley texts, paranoia or damage control? And then December 1st, 2022, Kanye shows up on Alex Jones wearing a full black mask and spirals into an interview that would be the tipping point. This is where he goes, I like Hitler. We've got to stop dissing the Nazis all the time. The Jewish media made us feel like Nazis never offered anything of value. In this interview, he also doubles down on his mom being sacrificed and on Harley Pasternak trying to lobotomize him. And then, like a magician who knows when to exit, he vanishes. After the InfoWars debacle, he kind of like went off the radar. Theophilus London, who was one of his collaborators at the time, is also reported missing. And on social media, this somehow becomes linked. Theo would later be found safe and sound. Later, we'd learned that Kanye West was being chased by creditors and getting served at the time. So perhaps he had been deliberately elusive to avoid getting served, and not because he was being cloned in a lab. But perception had already moved on. To fans, he'd been replaced. He was being reprogrammed. And then we have January 2024, when Bianca appears. After vanishing for weeks following one of his most controversial interviews ever, and just before the rollout of Vultures 1, Kanye reemerges and drops Bianca Censori. Overnight, she seemingly becomes everything. His wife, his constant public companion, his aesthetic filter and brand buffer, and legally his special power of attorney. She's not doing interviews. She's not clarifying her role. So the internet did what it does, and it just filled in the blanks. Can you feel the beat? I went into this project thinking I could crack the case, but the deeper I went, the more obvious it became. This theory wasn't built on facts. It was built on rhythm, because there is no proof. Trust me, I tried to find it. I thought to myself, well, if the theory is that she's a CIA Mossad agent, I'm going to call the Mossad. But I didn't waste my time, because no one's going to pick up the phone and confirm to a Psy-Op.
Thank you for calling the California Architects Board. We are not available to hear your call at this time.
The only truth I found was that every beat of this conspiracy theory came straight from Kanye. His quotes, his captions, his spirals, his sound bites. And when you trace those clips back to their source and line them up with real world events, the breadcrumbs always follow or preempt pressure. A lawsuit, a scandal, a brand collapse, an album rollout. That's not coincidence, that's choreography. And in my opinion, however small his inner circle may be today, Kanye is not dancing alone. Take the nitrous oxide rumor, the rumor that Kanye West is addicted to nitrous. That rumor was leaked by Milo Yiannopoulos, a far-right media guy turned Yeezy communications director. When Milo briefly left the company over protests of Yeezy and moral depravity, he claimed Kanye West was addicted to nitrous. And when Ye decides to pull off one of his wildest stunts yet, a Super Bowl ad that led to a swastika t-shirt, he decided to film the ad in a dentist chair, flashing the very titanium teeth that supposedly led to his addiction. Coincidence or plausible deniability? A moral implosion that can be rewritten by fans as a medical one. He's not unhinged. He's just an addict. Poor guy. Oh, and Milo, he's working for Ye again. And Bianca, whether she's a CIA honeypot agent or just a really quiet girl with a high tolerance for chaos, doesn't matter. The genius and ultimately the utility of her role is that it's one that you get to write. She's nothing but a cipher, a blank, beautiful container for our collective projections. And the theory that she's a handler, that Kanye is a clone, that Harley's Canadian intelligence sent to control and lobotomize Kanye, it doesn't survive because it's true. It survives because it's useful. Useful to the fans, useful to the trolls, useful to the platforms, and useful to Kanye. But most of all, useful to the system he's learned how to master. The Psy-Op isn't being run on Kanye. It's being run through him and on you. The entertainment industrial complex is what happens when media, tech, PR, fashion, celebrity, finance, all of the things form a single feedback loop. This is the loop. Spectacle is generated. Breakdowns, rebrands, stunts, scandals. Attention is captured. People share, react, theorize, debate. Platforms amplify it because engagement equals
Money.
medias cover it, even if it's empty, even if it hasn't been fact checked, because traffic is traffic and traffic equals
Money.
brands exploit it with merch, drops, aesthetic pivots, because
Money.
and then the cycle restarts. In this system, conspiracy and confusion aren't a glitch. They're the product. Because if Bianca is just a woman and Kanye just a flawed man, then we're forced to accept something far more terrifying. When reality gets that unstable, sometimes what we're looking for isn't the truth. We're looking for stories to cope. The question of whether or not Bianca Censori is a handler is one that, by design, cannot be answered because there is no girl, just a character, a cipher, a container, a screen. The point of this conspiracy was never for us to uncover the truth. You can't uncover the truth. It only exists so that you keep watching. And you did. And I did. And as one of Kanye's viral sound bites would put it,
Gotcha. Gotcha.
gotcha.